Hello and welcome to Self Power Now, where empowering women share their stories and advice about life, work, happiness, love, and success. I'm your host, Debbie Giussoni, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. So sit back and enjoy the show. Today, we're talking to Jane Singer, founder and managing director of Inside Fashion, the leading international market platform for the global fashion industry. Jane's also the host of the popular podcast, A Seat at the Table, which is currently downloaded in over 80 countries. Each week, she interviews industry leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, and innovators. With over 25 years' experience in international markets with extensive time in Asia, Jane is often called to host or be an expert speaker at industry conferences and corporate events around the world. Welcome, Jane.
Debbie, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm honored. I'm excited to be here with you. I think what you're doing is fabulous. I've read some of your work. I've had the opportunity to have you on my podcast. So this is really, I'm just thrilled.
Yes, we women have to support each other, right?
Absolutely.
Especially we women from New York. You're originally from New York, my home state, but 20 years ago, you got this idea to start a business in Hong Kong, of all things, for the fashion industry. And you're still at it, which is a pretty bold and personal move, I should say, and successful as well. I'm sure you learned a lot along the way, not only about launching a business, but about yourself as well, right? Tell
Absolutely.
us, tell us a little bit about your personal journey, your stumbling blocks and how you got through that.
Well, I mean, when people look at what you do from the outside, oftentimes they see a very well edited version because they're not there behind the scenes. And it's not that I try to gloss over all the incredible failures that I've had along the way. It's just simply that, in generally speaking, people aren't sitting down and talking about it with you. But I look at my journey more as, stumbling forward through stupidity than any kind of genius. I mean, I think that, if people were to say to me, what was the one thing, I would say simply keep on keeping on, the tenacity just to keep doing it. And I think that sounds very simplistic, but it really comes down to that. And I have made, some big mistakes, some small mistakes. I've made huge strategic errors. It's you have to be able to think about how you come back from that. And that sounds simple conceptually, but it's tough because you not only have to figure it out, but you also have all the emotional baggage of whatever else is coming down on you because of these stupid things that you've done. So, there's a lot to unpack on these things that oftentimes get glossed over when people talk about starting and running your own business.
Right. And you and I have had some conversations, and you're right. From the outside, I think, wow, Jane is just like kicking butt here. But I didn't know you through this whole journey. What were some of the things that you encountered, and how did you get over them?
Well, over the course of over 2 decades, of course, you're going to encounter many, many different things, right? Because you have things in your personal life, but you have things that happen outside of that, like the economy, for example. So
Hmm.
we had to live through, financial crisis. We had to live through SARS. Right now we have the pandemic. So these are all things that are external to our own personal lives. They just happen, and you have to think about how you adjust. And then you have stuff going on in your own life. And then you also have decisions that you make, which in my case, more often than not, turn out to be bad. So you have to be
tell
able
it.
to,
Tell us about one of those bad decisions.
oh my gosh, there's so many, it would be hard to, to pick one. But I think that, oftentimes you make mistakes, you think there's an opportunity in some place, you pursue it, you're not getting anywhere with it. The key is to be able to recognize that fine line between consistency, which is keep going. In other words, not expecting your results too soon, and knowing when you have to pivot. And I think oftentimes that comes down to not abandoning what you're doing, but fine tuning it. I think when I look at what other
Right.
people do, they're not getting results. I think too often people expect their results too soon. And we could do a whole podcast about that.
Hmm.
But I think that, to sum it up, you need a lot of runway to launch anything, even if you have an existing platform. So you
Hmm.
need to be really looking at more like 18 to 24 months. And most people are looking at 2 to 3 months. And they're like, oh, we didn't get anything back on this. So it was a waste of time. Whereas you have a long time, but you have to keep listening to what your audience or your customers are saying and fine tuning a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Not
Right.
saying, oh, well, we tried this. Okay, that doesn't work. We tried the next thing. It's, what about this do people like? What don't they like? Could we modify it a little bit? And that's really the way that people move forward more successfully than just simply either just keep doing what they're doing, getting no results, or on the other hand, just jumping from one thing to the next and gaining no traction.
Right. I think there's a little bit of like what I call course correction so
Yes,
that you know you stay on course but you have to pivot as you said. I love that. And also keeping the goal in mind but maybe not the same route that you had in your mind to get to that goal, right? And not being
yes,
attached to having things happen just a certain way because they don't. You know, life happens as you said, the economy, you know, things happen in your personal life and you know you move your house, you move your family, whatever that is, and you have to course correct along the way. So I think that attachment to doing things only one way is what gets people in trouble, especially when launching a business.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we always do it this way. We have to do it this way. Or they're starting something for whatever reason, they have in mind that this is the way you have to do things. And actually, not necessarily true, although there are always, common sense best practices, and it's good to understand those. But you also need to understand that maybe you need to do things somewhat differently in order to succeed within the parameters that you're operating in. And I think another thing that I see that people get wrong when they're starting a business, or even when they have an existing business and they're trying to re-energize it or whatever, is they focus on things that matter to them, but that actually don't matter to the customer.
Mm,
And it's so difficult to get people out of that head. And it took me a while to also, step back from that myself. And my brother's always been a good mentor in that way because he can really see things very clearly. And, he pointed out to me so many things that actually nobody else cares about. And, I see people, the number one thing I see that holds people back from getting started, right? Whether it be launching a business or launching a new product within their business, they want to get the logo right. They want to get the color
mm,
scheme right. They're like, the web design just isn't right just yet, or we're not sure of the name. I'm like, that doesn't matter to anybody but you, literally.
right.
I mean, you can see examples in the market, right, of things that we think that they're good names or good brands or good logos, but that's only because we're viewing them as a success, right?
Hmm.
Like, I'll give you an example that I guess everybody can relate to, and that's Apple. We think
Right.
Apple is the coolest company on earth, and they have been massively successful. But if you were sitting back down at the conference table back in the day when Apple was just getting started, and you were going to be building a computer company, right? A tech based company, a computer company, would Apple have been the name that came to mind as something that would have
Right.
been the ideal name? You would name it for a piece of fruit. I mean, honestly, most people sitting there at that point in time would not have said that. Brand experts, anybody would not have thought that would have been like the perfect name, right, for this groundbreaking tech company. Now, of
I'm trying to
course,
think back at my tech background and how did they get that name? But you're absolutely right because you can get mired in all these like stumbling blocks right from the get-go and you can't get out of the gate, right? Because
yeah,
you're focused on all the minutia and every business has minutia from the very start to, you know, every single day. And you've just got to keep moving forward as you said, keep one foot in front of the other, right?
yeah, you have to, if you look at it, you have to focus on what's going to matter most to your customer, your listener, your end user, because that's what's going to drive, whether it's sales or engagement or anything else. And we get
Mhm.
caught up in the fun stuff, right? People get
Mhm.
caught up. Of course, people love to do all that design stuff, and people love to buy equipment, get all that stuff going. But honestly, you get caught in that and you don't get going. And then you're not sure, but do I have the right mic for the podcast? Or do I have the right software for this? Or do I have the right office location? And at the end of the day, if you look at companies that have succeeded, you just start. You
You just
start,
go for it and you stumble and you fall, or as I say, not fail, but fall, and you
right,
get up and you see what works for you. But there's a whole personal thing around that as well, because especially you went to Hong Kong when you were fairly young launching this business. And there
right.
had to be a lot of angst about that and about your own self-confidence, breaking out in the world in a foreign country. What helped you get through some of the blocks in terms of being a successful woman entrepreneur?
The blindness and stupidity of youth. Know, when you're in your 20s, you don't
I love
see
it.
all the pitfalls. You know what I mean? And it's a blessing to be able to start things when you're young, because first of all, you don't
You don't
see
know
all
any
the,
better.
you don't know any better. And also if you fail, it's a lot easier to get back into the mainstream workforce than it is, when you get any point past, I'd say, your 30s. But that
Right,
being
right.
said, there's no earthly reason why you have to be in your 20s to start a business. And I started the podcast that I have just a year ago, and it's gone actually better than many other things that I've started. So,
Right. You
there you
just
go.
never know. Well, you mentioned earlier your brother. Did you have a lot of mentors and people that you could ask for help? And did you go ask for help? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems for women is not asking for help.
Yeah, I think that I didn't ask for help. First of all, it was, a long time ago. So you
Hmm.
didn't have as much help available, or at least as visibly available. Nowadays, online makes it easier to connect with people who are not in your physical region, right? Um,
Hmm.
and also, I think that as women, we tend to feel that we need to be self sufficient. And
Yeah.
so, I have always been of the mindset that I'll figure it out, even on something simple. If there's a tech support, right, issue with something, of course, I like the technical side of things, but even so, I'll sit there and Google it and work it out. And only when I really hit a wall do I put in a support ticket, even though the support comes with whatever platform I'm using, like our website or things like
But
that.
do you think like something like that takes you away from, your main job? Because for me, I'm the complete opposite. I hit a tech block. I just want someone to help that's an expert. I don't want to have to try to figure it out. And maybe
Right.
that's my personality, but I'd rather get the help that the expert help in that rather than spending my time on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you could say that that's a bad example because I find that interesting to work on that stuff. But I think in other things, we don't even consider that there could be someone who might help,
Hmm.
or we don't know where to find it, right? So you think
Right.
there may be someone who could answer this question. I think, the fact that now we have so much available online. I mean, you can go on YouTube and look up how to do anything, literally
Right. There's
anything.
there's a
And
video for everything. Exactly.
yeah, and a lot of it is put out there, not all of it, but there is a lot of content put out by people who really do have a tremendous amount of expertise. So
Hmm.
I would say to people, at least start there. And then after that, judiciously, you may wish to engage the services of people who have expertise and can help you. But I think
Hmm.
we don't think about it from that point of view. We feel obligated to just do it ourselves, so to speak.
Right. Do you think part of that is the whole perfection gene? I mean, I know for me, I'm sort of this type A personality that always wanted an A in school. It's that
Mm,
carried over into everything from success at my corporate job to, how clean my house is. And with age, I think comes wisdom, and I've sort of let go of a lot of that. Are you similar to that?
absolutely. I think that you sound like you grew up in sort of the same milieu as myself, where we were brought
Yeah.
up with those values. We were
Right.
brought up. I mean, I think that maybe now things have gotten a little bit too lax, but I think that we grew up in a mindset, in an era where perfectionism was lauded. Being a straight A student, being 100% tidy in your workspace, in your keeping your bedroom clean, keeping your desktop clean, and like we're perfect, though, not just clean but perfect, with everything lined up in a certain way, and everything you needed to always look perfect, and be excellent at everything. So if you sort of marinated in that kind of mindset growing up, you can't help but be of that mindset as an adult. But I think that, yeah, it's interesting. One of the differences that I see, and I'm speaking broadly, between men and women, is that women overthink things tremendously. And I can see this when I've had women on my podcast, right? And they'll listen to the playback when I send them and say, oh, you're live and it's going well. And they'll be like, yeah, but there's that spot where you sort of talked over me. And I was like, it's a conversation. It's cool.
Or I said too many times.
Yeah, I mean, men don't care, man. They just get on the
Yeah.
show. And, I think if they feel nervous about being on the show, they just say no. I don't know why they say no, but there's people who you reach out, hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast. And nobody gets back to you. That's basically, I don't want to do it for whatever reason. But
Right. Or
I think
maybe they don't want to be on camera. I mean, this podcast is all audio, but I know you've started doing yours on video, and that's
yeah.
a hard thing for women. I mean, I know when I get on a
Mm,
Zoom call, I've got to check my lighting, check this, check
mm.
that, check the makeup. And men don't need to do that, nor do they care.
Well, I think that don't care. And I think that shifted a little bit. I think that younger generation men are a lot more caring of that kind of thing. But I think that for women, we need to learn. And boy, this took me a long time to go from concept to actually, integrating it into my life. And that is that actually nobody cares about you. They actually don't. They
I
don't.
love it.
They are not noticing you. Like, but I have this huge coffee stain on the front of my white blouse because I was careless when I was putting, the cream in my coffee at Starbucks. I took the lid off and it splashed on me. And you're like, how can nobody see it? And like, because people are
Nobody
so in
cares.
their own heads thinking about the soup stain on their tie that they don't notice the coffee stain on your blouse. People are so distracted these days. I mean, that people always were thinking about themselves, but think about it now. They're not even looking at you. They're looking at their phone. I've been in meetings with people. It's so bloody rude, but they actually have the phone on the desk and they're talking to me and looking at
I
checking
hate that. Oh my
their
God, I hate
alerts. I'm
that.
just thinking to myself, well, and well, who cares? But the point of the matter is, nobody is really paying. They're not even looking where they're walking, right? Something that actually could impact them. So I say to people, and I had to get over this too. I mean, I'm not, I don't look good on camera like ever. And I finally had to say to myself, who cares, Jane? Just do it. Just do it. And the
Yeah,
thing,
I
and
think
we,
that's hard.
even like sending an email. How many times will I read an email right before I send it? Should there be a comma here? Let me reread it. No,
Oh
come
my
on.
gosh, I do that all the time. I
Let me put
know.
an
I
exclamation, no,
know.
an exclamation point. That's far too aggressive. It's like, who the hell reads that?
You're reading into what people are going to
Right,
read into. Yeah. Well, it's the
exactly.
same thing, it's the same thing if we've got listeners that maybe aren't in work, but they're managing a household. It's the same thing. It's like my mother always saying, "Oh, you got to clean the bathroom before someone comes, or you got to make this sure this is spotless." And guess what? People
Mm,
come, they don't see any of that. They don't
that's
see
right.
any of it. It's just what you see.
Correct.
And getting over that is a big, big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took me a long, long time to realize that and to stop worrying about all this stuff. And you try your best, you do what you can. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't show up at something inappropriately dressed for the
Right.
occasion. I wouldn't be the kind of person who just says, hey, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to wear what I feel like. No, I think about where am I going and what would be the appropriate thing to wear. I try my best to leave the house looking presentable. But I mean, once I get out the door and
Then you got to
everything else
leave it.
is
Yeah, then
fast,
you got to leave it. But you're right. You have to try your best, right? That's all
yeah,
we could all hope for everyone to do is to just try their best. And that has to be enough. For women, though, I think there's just so much pressure that that's not always enough. They don't feel like that's enough. And at some
yes,
point, you just have to, as you said, say, okay, I've done my best. That's it. This is what you get, kind of thing.
yeah. And I think the other thing is that I've had to learn, and that is more probably related to business, but it carries over into personal stuff as well, is you can't take everything personally. If you're presenting someone something in a business meeting, it may be a proposal, you may be trying to sell somebody something in that kind of a scenario, and they reject it, just move on, right?
Right.
If I reach out to somebody to be on the podcast and I don't hear back from them or they say no, I don't try to go back to them and I don't. I just next. and
Yeah,
it doesn't
and I
matter.
think that comes with age. Absolutely. I've gotten to that point too because I sort of have this line, well, if it was meant to be, it will be.
Yes.
And not to push so hard. And I spent many years in sales roles, so I get that,
Yeah.
rejection over rejection over rejection. You just got to get up and keep going.
Right.
And at some point you sort of have to leave the nose behind and just go forward. And that's so important though.
Yeah, I think you have to, if you're getting a lot of pushback, you have to sort of think about, is there a common thread? Sometimes it could be that,
Mm-hmm.
well, the email outreach I'm sending, people don't understand what I'm asking. So that could be the case. It could be that, gee, I've asked for something and they don't understand. They think I want one thing when it's another. So you do want to fine tune, but you can't take it personally. You have to find your tribe. And I think that we come from a mindset of trying to win everybody over. And it's always like, do you like me? But do you like me? Right?
Do you
Am I
like
good
me?
enough? Yeah. How do you rate me? When in the end, you have to be you and then find those people who like you. But we sort of say, well, I want you to like me. What do I have to do to make you like me? Or to make you
Right.
like the product that I'm selling, right? I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you're in a business situation, and actually, like the song says, love the one you're with. And that it really comes down to that. It really comes down to not always trying to push water uphill. You want to balance that, of course, with self-improvement, because you can take that to the extreme, right?
Yeah, and that's what I talk to women about all the time is, I always use that analogy. I'm glad you brought that up of life being a river, right?
Right.
And you going down the river, put the paddles in the boat and go where the river takes you. Yeah, you've got to navigate around some rocks and you've got to, maybe you get stuck on the bank sometimes, but you can only go one direction in the river, and that's one way, and that's down the river. If you constantly try to paddle up the river, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're just going to get frustration and suffering. And whether it's business or life, I find that people are going up the river a lot and they're getting angrier and more frustrated and they're wondering why things won't work. And sometimes you have to just go with the flow.
Yeah. Absolutely. People determine what they want and then they try to go for it. And yes, that's a very good thing to do because you want to have a goal, but you also have to be cognizant of feedback that you're getting that may be telling you that that might not be the right goal.
Course
Um,
correct.
and that's a very difficult thing to parse, particularly when you need to put that into something that's more tangible and factual. It's something that's a more intuitive kind of a thing.
Right. And it actually is more empowering. It's sort of this, you feel like you're unempowered when you don't have full control or you can't get things done the way you want to get them done. But
Right.
really, when you release control is when you feel most empowered, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of that detached from the end results. And I think that, if I look at my most recent project, right, which is the podcast that I started about a year ago, I started that with no end goal. I really wanted to be able to talk to people that had something that was visionary to share, that were moving forward,
Hmm.
as opposed to people who were just repeating the same rhetoric, which is what they read in the headline news, and that was all of a sudden.
Mm.
I just got sick of that, so I started. I had no goal of monetizing it. I had no goal of how many people were going to listen to it. I don't want to say I did it just for me, but in a sense I did. I wanted to build something that I thought was of quality. And because I didn't have all those end goals attached to it, I think it worked out better. The right people have come
Right.
along to be on that show. I mean, not that I haven't had a few that weren't too great along the way, but most of them were just the right people. And everything has flowed with that program. Everything has fallen into place. It's a joy to do it. Writing the intros about all these people just comes to me naturally, where otherwise I always struggle to write stuff.
Hmm.
I truly, really love and admire and respect all the people who've been guests on the show. And I think it's, again, I was detached from any outcome. As it turns out, it's now in 88 countries. We have a sponsor, and so on and so forth. But I've never gotten into that, pushing kind of a sensation.
You
And I
just
don't
you
know that.
just let it evolve and look at it. Wow, that
No, I'm
that
not
is
saying
fantastic.
Yeah, now that may or may not be, you can't do that in every aspect of your life because I wasn't relying on that, right, to pay the bills. But whenever you can detach from the outcome and say, no matter what happens, I'll be okay.
Hmm.
Wow, that is a very, very liberating mindset.
And also continue to do what you really love to do. As you said, you love you and I actually we're kind of cut from the same cloth. I love learning about people's lives. I love
Mm,
getting tips about life and business from people and I love women's stories. I love talking about women's stories and getting women together to empower each other. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast that I'm doing. So it's so fun to talk to you about that.
yeah, well, I also love to hear people's stories. I love to read biographies. I like to see, how they got from, where they were to where they are. It's really interesting to see what choices they made along the way, how they figured things out. Yeah, I definitely find that very inspiring.
And also to talk to someone like you who's frank about it and says, hey, look, it wasn't easy, but I did it. I put one foot in front of the other and and I got to certain goals, but I failed a lot too, right?
Yeah,
I learned a
sure.
lot. Sometimes, it's a shit show, whatever.
Right, it
Um,
is.
and other women need to hear that. Other people need to hear that because from the outside, as you started saying at the very start of the interview, everything looks perfect, right? On the
Yeah,
outside. You look at someone and they look successful and you read their bio, their snippet bio, right? Like
right.
I did read yours at the beginning and you're like, "Wow, that woman really has it all together." But in essence, every day is a challenge and there's lots of ups and downs.
Yeah, I think I think that's a very good point. And I think that people ask me, should I start my own business? Or right now, we're sort of in a phase where everybody's being encouraged to be an entrepreneur. That's the cool thing to do. Quit your day job. People telling you how, you can make passive income, make money while you sleep. And I'm just sitting there saying to myself,
No, you
I
can't.
actually, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I would encourage people to do whatever they feel compelled to do, for sure. I would never want to hold somebody back and tell them it's impossible, you can't do it. But on the other hand, I think that you need to go into things eyes wide open. And you never see all the pitfalls along the way, right? On a very long journey. But I
Hmm.
think you have to go into something with a more realistic outlook than what people are being encouraged to do,
Hmm.
because you need to have a long runway. And a lot of that comes from starting off by being conservative. And I think that, I see people just jump into these things. And I think
Right.
to myself, you need to, when you get into any kind of an entrepreneur situation, you need to understand it's really a marathon, right? Not a sprint. And
It's
it's a
not a get
long
rich quick
marathon.
scheme. Yeah.
It I haven't seen any cases of that other than a few people who've had lottery wins. But it's a marathon. And you have to think to yourself, do I have the endurance for it? You start out, everything's great, we're happy, it's a nice day, I'm running down the road here, I'm feeling good. And then,
Mm.
okay, wow, it's starting, ooh, my legs are starting to get really tired.
Or
Wow, wow.
COVID hits, right? Or COVID, something like
Yeah,
COVID, or the
I'm
economy collapses. Yeah.
it's hard to breathe, but I have to keep going. I'm committed to this. And then you get to the point where you're just like, get me out of here. Uh, and you're running down the road and you're just like, oh, where's the end? And then you realize, oh, I have my cell phone with me. Right. So you take it out and you call Uber. But the thing is, you can do that maybe on a marathon, but when you're running a business, like there's no Uber to call. So,
Yeah.
you have to think about, not to be dissuaded, but you have to plan for the downside, right? It's like I heard a quote from Neil Armstrong that said, there's two things you need to figure out when going to the moon. One of them is how to get there, and the other is how to get back. And don't
Mm.
leave before you have both of them figured out. And you don't have to literally figure out the worst case scenario. You have to think to yourself, what if it doesn't work out, right? What's going to be next?
Yeah.
And
What's the backup plan? Yeah.
yeah, and I think that, when people are being encouraged to quit their day jobs, I would say a day job is a luxury.
Right.
If you
Right.
can start your business while you have a day job, it's like, and people I hear people saying, oh no, if only I just want to quit this job so I can work full time on my business. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but you're not going to have any revenue.
And
So
you won't have any time initially either. Free time, that is. It's a lot harder than people think,
it
having
really
been in
is.
my own business for a long time as well. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that people aren't necessarily being given the most accurate advice on all of this. And yeah, it looks good on the outside, but people don't have, thank God, a camera in my house seeing me lying on my bed crying, right?
So last question, what do you do when that happens? So you're down on you've had a bad day or a bad month or bad year or whatnot. What is it that you can do to make you feel empowered again, or to de-stress, or to get back in the game? What does Jane do?
I try. I mean, every circumstance is different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm always dealing with overwhelm. So I just try to say to myself, all right, Jane, sit down and, okay, what's the real problem here? What's really bothering you? I feel overwhelmed. I have too much work. I just can't get it done. I've had that sinking feeling that I'm not going to make my goals. We're not going to get the revenue in, or whatever it may be. And then I try to break it down and break it down further and further and further, and identify what's the real problem. What could I do now? Right? What could I
Mm-hmm.
do?
Mm-hmm.
So if I feel overwhelmed with work, I say, okay, write down everything you need to get done. Just write it all down. It could be anything, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even like tidying up my desktop, whatever it may be. And then start to draw a line through anything that doesn't absolutely have to be done.
That day, right? Because it'll be there tomorrow. Exactly.
Right. So what can I start to offload? Because I'm the kind of person who just keeps piling on things. I'll take on this, I'll take on that. Okay, we need to do this and we need to do that. Do you really?
Or what can you say no to, right?
Yeah. Does it need to be done today?
Right.
You
What
know,
about personally? How do you nourish yourself,
I think
your
that,
your soul, your spirit?
I mean, exercise plays a key role. I
Mm-hmm.
find that if I can get, especially if it's outdoor exercise, it's very mood lifting,
Mm-hmm.
which is really important. Um, I watch tons of YouTube and try to learn from people with their ideas of what to do and how to do it. And then there's other times when you just feel like you don't know what to do next. And that's tough. You just have to think about it and say, what could I do? And try to start
Or,
doing something.
sometimes it's not doing anything and being okay with that too.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, yeah, I would say that there is no magic potion,
Mm-hmm.
but a combination, for me personally, at least, of physical exercise that I just sort of burn that stress off.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Um,
so important. So important.
mm,
And
trying
sleep, right? And sleep.
Sleep is critical. But yeah, it's tough. There are times when you don't know what you're going to do next. You really, and that's a terrible place to be. But I think that, having support groups is important.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can help. And I think finding those people who are like-minded and who are at a similar point in the journey as you is not easy to find, but can be invaluable.
Yes. Yes. And I'm so glad you're on this journey with me, Jane.
Well, I'm happy to be with you. I think that, we can do so much to support each other.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for your presence here and all your insights, not only on business, but also on life. And our listeners can find more information about Jane and sites to connect with Jane on our episode page. Jane, have a wonderful day across the world in Japan today.
Thanks so much, Debbie. It's really been a pleasure. And I'm excited for everything that you're doing here on this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Self Power Now. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with others, follow it on your favorite podcast platform, and join our community on selfpowernow.com and receive 3 free happiness gifts. And while you're there, if you're looking for more ways to be happy, healthy, peaceful, and loved, check out my books and new online courses. Until next time, this is Debbie Giassoni wishing you self-power now.